You're not a nice person.
Sequence starts.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's that time again. Matt Connarton, Unleashed in the Afternoon. We are live on WMNH 95.3 FM, emanating from downtown Manchester, New Hampshire, streaming at WMNHradio.org. Of course, you can find WMNH on the TuneIn app, so you can take us wherever you go on your mobile device. And we're on Channel 97 Comcast in Manchester, and of course on Facebook via Facebook Live on the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page. Have you liked the page yet? If not, I would love it if you would like it. And let's see, I see Jenny in the Facebook Live chat already, as well as Ben Dion, host of the weekly Dion, which is Thursdays at 6 p.m., immediately following this program, or program, as they say on the BBC. That was, by the way, that was John Fugelsang performing his version of, Won't You Be My Lawyer at the beginning, which, of course, if you were watching on Facebook, you didn't get to hear that part because I had to keep the volume down on the Facebook Live feed while I played that song because they get all worked up in a tizzy if you stream copyrighted material on Facebook. So, but I'll tell you what, if you want, you can always participate in the Facebook Live chat while streaming the show at WMNHradio.org. That way you can experience every scintillating second of the show. You don't have to miss a thing. Let's see. Also, too, of course, in addition to participating in the Facebook Live chat, you can give us a call, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007, taking your calls for the next about 115 minutes. So it's, we're about 5 minutes in. Let's see. Of course, and I always forget to mention you can tweet me at Matt Connarton. I do try to keep an eye on the Twitter as well. I'm bad at Twitter. Some people are good at Twitter. I'm not good at it. But I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to improve. I even try to send out a tweet of my own once. We don't really send out a tweet. You tweet a tweet. Right? You don't send out a tweet. But sometimes people say post a tweet, which sounds awkward. You post on Facebook. You don't post a tweet. You tweet a tweet. You issue a tweet, if you will. Hello to Brian Brody, who joins us in the Facebook Live chat, host of All Natural Being with Brian Brody. Let's see. I'm always fascinated as a broadcaster. I'm always fascinated at the things that happen in various broadcast medium where people get into trouble. And, having sort of grown up listening to shows like Howard Stern, not literally grown up. I think I was already an adult when Howard Stern became a household name. But, you understand what I'm saying. Broadcasters like Opie and Anthony and so forth. And, of course, everyone remembers what happened with Don Imus. It's always fascinating to me whenever someone in radio gets into trouble or someone on television gets into trouble and maybe they lose sponsors and advertisers, maybe, like what happened to Laura Ingraham when she attacked that gentleman, David Hogg. There are consequences for what we say. And, of course, I'm always fascinated, too, by the psychology of it. When someone makes that calculation in their mind when they do something, or maybe they tweet something, in the case of Roseanne, for example, that they must know on some level that this is going to be potentially damaging to their career, or they might know that there's that risk, but they're making perhaps it's a calculated risk, and they're trying to weigh, okay, how potentially damaging could this be versus will this get me some publicity that will ultimately be positive? During the shock jock era of radio, it was not unusual to sort of fail upward. If you're in the Boston radio market, which, sort of, I mean, New Hampshire, southern New Hampshire is, for our listeners here, we're sort of part of that media market. You might remember years ago when Opie and Anthony were fired from WAAF, but in their case, that actually led to larger opportunities for them. So it's, there's that saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity. Of course, there's a million exceptions to that rule. But anyway, so there was a comedian who appeared on Fox News who was apparently, I've never heard of this individual before, so I assume he was seizing the moment to try to make a name for himself. But again, it's an example where what I'm going to share with you now, and it's from this is from Politico. And Fox, of course, has had to address this. It's an example where someone said something that obviously this was going to have consequences, right? So I assume this individual took that calculated risk. Maybe he's going to be able to build his brand online by saying something that will be obviously tagged as racist on Fox. And or maybe he just is so just sort of oblivious to the potential consequences of what he was doing that he actually didn't think it would be a big deal. I don't know. Or maybe he thought, oh, I'm on Fox. And, the Fox audience, 70-year-old white men. And I say that not to be funny, but that is the key demographic of Fox. I mean, their own internal data shows that. That's the key demographic. 70-year-old white conservative men. That's who's watching Fox News. That's why you see ads for catheters on Fox late at night. I'm sort of kidding about the catheters because I also used to see those ads on MSNBC late at night back when I had cable. We've cut the cord. We just, you can get everything online now, but including cable news. You can get pirated streams on YouTube. Anyway, but maybe he thought, since that's the key audience, no one will be upset. No one will bat an eye at what he said. But when I read this, and we don't have the actual clip, but when I read this, and of course, if I were to play the actual clip, I might get myself in trouble. So maybe that's just as well. But, it just really struck me as an example where how could he not have known? He had to have known there would be consequences for this. Again, I don't mean to go back to the Roseanne thing, and I don't mean to harp on that, but the psychology of that is fascinating to me because there's no way, had she been in her right mind, and I know she blamed the, what did she blame again that she was on? She blamed some medication for what happened, and the manufacturer of that medication issued a statement saying, taking our medication, does not make you racist. It's not one of the side effects. But, clearly that's a self-destructive act. That's self-immolation of one's career, what she did. There's no way a sane, clear-thinking person could have done that and not known that was going to destroy what they had built and affect a lot of other people around her as well. There's no way she could have not known. So the psychology of that is always very interesting to me. What goes on in someone's head who does that? So that's part of why these things are so interesting to me. Of course, I'm always interested in any kind of controversy going on in the media. That's always fascinating to me. But I'm also interested in the psychology of what is it that causes someone to self-destruct. Or are they not actually trying to self-destruct, but they're taking that calculated risk that I talked about? So let's get to it. So this is from Politico. Fox News addresses host's response to racist comments. See, this ensnared also the hosts of the show. And, we can talk about whether or not that's fair. It wasn't the host who said this. It was a guest. But it says here, it was not a drill. Saturday night on Jesse Waters' show was the moment Fox News CEO Suzanne Scott had instructed her top producers to be prepared for in hopes of stemming the damage caused by an obviously racist or offensive comments made on air. Waters was discussing the controversy that had developed around old tweets by a recent New York Times editorial board hire, Sarah Jeong, with his Waters World guest. That's the name of the show, Jesse Waters' show. I guess it's a play on Waterworld, the Kevin Costner movie. It's Waters World. Because when because he used to do it as a segment on O'Reilly, Bill O'Reilly's show. And of course, Bill O'Reilly has now been relegated to the internet. But I've shed no tears for Bill O'Reilly. I mean, he got quite the golden parachute on his way out the door, and he engaged in some pretty scummy behavior. Anyway, so now Waters World is its own show. All right, so his guest was comedian and social commentator Terrence K. Williams. During the conversation, Williams made a series of racist comments criticizing the New York Times and Jiang. Williams said this, quote, "I don't know if this lady is Chinese, Japanese, or crazy knees. Something is wrong with this woman, and I can't believe they would hire her," unquote. Yeah, now it gets worse. If you're thinking, oh, that's not so bad. No. It gets worse. But even that, it's like, yikes. I mean, and I get it. That, well, he's a comedian and he's trying to be funny. He's not like being a serious guy. But again, even if you're fine with that, whether you're fine with that or not, in this climate, you can't do that. in these politically correct times that we live in, intent doesn't really matter. Context doesn't even matter anymore, frankly. I think it should, but it really doesn't. Hello to Teddy Westwood Payne in the Facebook live chat. And hello to Fred Bonig from the Daily Ripple. He says, I think you'll like this list of songs. Interesting. I'm going to check that out in a moment. So Waters was discussing the controversy. Okay, so then I read to you Williams' first quote. Waters appeared to laugh off the statement and continued the conversation. Soon after, Williams said, quote, he said, quote, "There is something wrong with them fortune cookies that Ling Ling is eating," unquote. Yikes. See, how could he not know? He had to have known. The guy had to have known that this would that there would be blowback from this. And I suspect he knew that and he was banking on it. He wanted that. And he was seizing the moment to be controversial and edgy, hoping that it would help his career. Which it may. It also may not. He also may have destroyed his career. Who knows? It'll take a little time to see how. Then again, I'd never even heard of the guy before, so maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it may not do either. I don't know. The episode came not long after a mid-June meeting in which Scott assembled her top producers and told them that they would be held accountable for any inflammatory comments made by hosts or panelists, and that it was their job to head off inappropriate remarks. Uh-oh. That's a pretty tough policy. I personally don't think that's fair. I mean, me as a host, I mean, if someone came in here and said something like that, obviously I would respond to it and address it, and I would say, yeah, I think we're done here, but, I can't control necessarily what, I mean, I can try to make good decisions and judgments about who I bring on as a guest, and obviously, if I suspect that someone's going to come on and say a bunch of racist things, or make jokes that someone might interpret as racist and have a problem with, I would make that judgment and say, no, I'm not gonna do that, right? But if someone comes on and surprises me with something, I don't know that that's fair. I'm sorry. You know what? We need to kind of back up a little bit because I missed something here. So in regard to what Scott said at the meeting and when she addressed her hosts and producers. So in the moment after this guy Williams makes the Ling Ling comment, Waters, again while laughing, said, quote, "Terrence, I think you now have gotten yourself in trouble," unquote, and then cut the segment off. So Waters did respond, said, okay, we're done. That's too far. All right, so Scott had that mid-June meeting. Scott emphasized in the meeting that if something offensive was said on air, the producers needed to get in the host's ear and make sure it was addressed immediately. In this case, that did not happen with Waters. Well, I don't know. I guess it depends on what you mean by addressing it. I mean, he did cut the segment off, and he did say, I think you've gotten yourself into trouble. In other words, I mean, I'm not a fan of Jesse Waters. I think he's a hack, so I'm not really excited to defend him, but I'm not sure that does that not count, addressing the matter, or, well, maybe it doesn't. I'm not making an argument that that's good enough, by the way, just to be clear. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. What would constitute addressing the matter? I mean, he addressed it in the sense that he cut the segment off, right, and said that's enough. But maybe he should have, maybe addressing it would be saying, when they came back from break, saying, by the way, I don't agree or condone with what Mr. Williams was saying. I think he went too far, and that was racist, and I'm not racist, and don't think I'm racist just because I'm on Fox. I'm kidding. That's people get upset with me when I make little comments like that. And it's just fun to pick on Fox. I mean, again, their key demographic is 70-year-old white men. Maybe when I'm 70 years old and white, which I assume I will be still, maybe I'll be watching Fox News. I don't know. Hey, we have a call. Let's grab this. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed in the Afternoon. Who's this? Is this Melania? Why are people so mean to Melania? Do you feel that you've been treated unfair on Fox News, Melania? Dirty old men. That's who watches Fox News. That's their key demographic. Well, I don't know about dirty. I mean, they're 70-year-old men, yes.
Oh, yeah, and the chubby one, he's so cute. He there today?
The chubby one?
Oh, little bald. He looked like Elf.
Oh, you're talking about, are you talking about John Hopwood? I don't think it was chubby. He's more cherubic or cherubic, however you say that.
It's Suchka, it's Suchka mean.
Sometimes I just want to pinch his cheeks.
Just give me chocolate chip cookie to my hobby.
Chocolate.
Ivanka, she's such bad girl, Mac. You don't know.
You don't like Ivanka?
You don't know. She makes life so hard on Melania.
Wow. Well, that's terrible.
Chocolate chip cookie to my hobby. So he know eat snack because his tummy's so big, Mac. So big that
he's a little chubby. He's kind of a chubbers, huh? The president, not to fat shame, but he's not particularly. He used to be very svelte in his youth.
She bring the cookie in that naughty girl Ivanka, and Melania, we take bite out the cookie. That's such because she put her flax in cookies, Mac. Oh, Mac, why are people so mean?
I don't know. I think look, if that cookie is intended for your husband, he should be able to eat the whole cookie. I don't think.
And then I talked to my hubby. I said, you need to do something about that girl.
Well, that is his daughter.
Melania, you fired. You fired.
Oh my goodness, you've been fired? That's terrible.
If Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her.
Well, did you hang up on Melania? I think she hung up. That's terrible. I can't believe. Well, that's breaking news right here on Matt Connarton Unleashed in the Afternoon. Melania has been fired by President Donald John Trump. Now, I don't know what the further implications of that may be. They are married, after all. Perhaps his intention was to divorce her, and he got confused and thought he could just fire her. I bet Rudy Giuliani gave him some bad advice, which I know that's difficult to imagine. Rudy Giuliani, who, if you've seen him on television in his defenses of the president and his dismissal of the Russia probe, Rudy Giuliani clearly exudes a certain competence in terms of his lawyering. Just a brilliant legal mind, and in no way has made a bigger mess out of everything than it already was. So he may have given Trump, but he may have given Trump some bad advice. You can't simply fire your wife. But I would, who I would recommend if Trump talked to is perhaps Newt Gingrich. And now Newt Gingrich, he knows a bit more the ins and outs of divorce and is quite ruthless in doing so. Newt Gingrich, you might remember, infamously split from one of his wives while she was in the hospital dying. So he knows how to do this. But Giuliani, clearly, don't listen to him on these matters. I mean, he knows a little bit about divorce himself, but again, Giuliani's divorce has not been smooth, or divorces, right? So not that and Giuliani kind of does have the crazy eyes going, if you've noticed, but I'm not, in no way am I trying to disregard the legal expertise of Rudy Giuliani. I mean, I personally wouldn't defend him. I wouldn't want to depend on him to defend me in traffic court, but that's just me. Anyway, I think that's what's really going on here. I think he told Trump, yeah, just fire her, and he did, and poor Melania. I feel terrible about this, and all of this over a cookie. I mean, I'm still a little confused about what was going on with the cookie. Somebody took a bite of the cookie. Maybe Rudy Giuliani took a bite of the cookie. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe he's got to keep his blood sugar up for those Fox News appearances so he doesn't get horribly confused and make things inadvertently much worse for his client, with a lot of incoherent rambling and the crazy eyes and the bringing things up that nobody even knew about, like a second meeting. Remember that day? That was fascinating. Rudy Giuliani, he calls into that show outnumbered, and he starts talking about a second Trump Tower meeting that nobody even knew about. And then the hosts on Fox, they're sitting there. You can see the panic in their faces because they're like, oh no, how do we spin this? Because they don't want to upset daddy. I did say that's the key demographic of Fox News, 70-year-old men. Trump is, what is he now, 71, 72? He fits right in there. Not that the whole catheter thing applies to him at all, because obviously, as his own doctor had said, Donald John Trump, despite his age, despite his advanced age and his advanced weight, is the healthiest human being ever in the history of the galaxy to be president of anything. And we must keep that in mind. He is truly a picture of health. Well, not a picture of health. He doesn't look that great. But he truly is the embodiment of good health. He's a paragon of healthy living. So I think that's very exciting. And that's something we all need to keep in mind. So anyway, getting back to this. But thank you for the call, Melania. It's always nice to hear from Melania Trump. Although I must tell you, it's a little difficult to understand her. I don't know if it's the accent. I don't know if it's my own hearing deficit. I don't know what's going on there. Well, hearing deficits don't matter anymore, from what I understand. All right, so it says here, a Fox News spokesperson said on Monday that the issue was being addressed with the producers and talent involved. The spokesperson declined to offer further details on what that entailed. This isn't the first time Waters has been in hot water. Oh, I see what you did there, whoever wrote this. Over offensive statements about Asians. On Bill O'Reilly's old show, Waters did ambush-style and man-in-the-street interview segments and drew criticism in 2016 when he did a series of mocking interviews in New York's Chinatown, playing on racist stereotypes. Oh boy, I bet that was highbrow stuff. I bet it was just incredible comedy. Being a little bit sarcastic, the episode prompted widespread condemnation, including from politicians like New York Mayor Bill de Blasio. The meeting in June came after a series of offensive comments made on Fox News. At the time, a Fox News spokesperson said, quote, as the CEO of the network, Suzanne Scott regularly leads executive and editorial meetings as she expects accountability from her senior staff, which is what all good leaders do, unquote. The day before the meeting, former Donald Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski had appeared on the network and belittled a migrant 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome who was reportedly separated from her mother at the southern border, saying womp womp to her story. The Fox host did not say anything to address Lewandowski's remarks. Yes, Lewandowski, making New Hampshire proud. He's a New Hampshire guy. Not long before that, conservative commentator Ann Coulter, who is definitely not from New Hampshire, had appeared on Fox News as a guest and falsely alleged that the children at the border were child actors. Again, the host let the comment go unchallenged on air. Maybe I'll find the clip later when I play a song and we'll come back to it. But when I remember watching that, I mean, I wasn't watching the show live, but I remember seeing the clip. Ann Coulter, she did kind of go, well, first of all, Ann Coulter should be very careful because look what just happened to Alex Jones, and he's into the whole child actor thing. So let's be a little bit careful there, Ann Coulter, or you might be kicked off of everywhere. But I say that somewhat kidding. I actually don't care if Ann Coulter gets, well, she is entertaining. We should keep her around, I guess. But I remember the show that she was, I don't remember what show it was, and I don't even remember who the host was. I think it was one of those weekend shows on Fox. But she says it, and I remember the host acting kind of laughing kind of uncomfortably and whatnot. The host did not directly challenge her on the air, and I think in defense of the host and in defense of Fox in this particular instance, I think the show was wrapping up or they were going to a break, and it was really obvious from the reaction of the host that, I mean, it was kind of like, I don't think the guy actually rolled his eyes necessarily, but it was pretty obvious that, okay, Ann has just said something ludicrous, and she's just being controversial for the sake of being controversial because she has some books to sell, and that's what's really going on. And thanks, Ann Coulter. We're going to go to a break now. That was definitely my interpretation of it. So anyway, so it says here, a few days after Scott's meeting, though, when Democratic strategist Joel Payne argued on air that the White House was using racist dog whistles, David Bossie, a Fox News contributor and former Trump deputy campaign manager, told Payne, who is black, quote, "You're out of your cotton-picking mind," unquote. Oh, I remember that vividly. In this case, host Ed Henry forcefully denounced Bossie's statement on air. Henry said, quote, "I want to make clear, Fox News and this show, myself, we don't agree with that particular phrase. It was obviously offensive," unquote, Henry said following Bossie's statements. Yeah, that I do recall, and Bossie was clearly trying to be, in my view, I mean, I don't know what's in the guy's head or in the guy's heart, but it looked to me like he was trying to be a racist jerk, and it was addressed correctly. And I think he ended up apologizing, although it was sort of one of those non-apology apologies, like, I'm sorry if I've offended you. So that was how Scott had instructed her staff to respond, and was probably the type of reaction she would have preferred from Waters. Bossie, a Fox News contributor, was suspended for 2 weeks for his statement. Williams, however, is not a Fox News contributor and was just a guest on the show. So we'll see. Will Jesse Waters be suspended? Let's see. Something just kind of, I kind of debated whether or not to even bother with this, but so Dan Rather had interviewed Donald Trump and Melania back in 1999. 2000 party over. Anyway, wow, that was almost 20 years ago. I didn't think that Trump and Melania had even been married that long. My goodness. So, you know, at that time, Trump was kind of flirting with the idea of running for president, or maybe it was governor of New York, but I think it was president. And I just think this is it. I'm not going to play the whole segment. It's like 13 minutes long, and I'm not going to play the whole thing for you, but couple observations. For one thing, I mean, Trump, if you watch any earlier clips of Trump, before he got weird, before he became in 2011 sort of king of the birthers and whatnot, he seemed different. He just seemed like certainly a more articulate individual than he is today. And you might attribute some of that to age. You might attribute some of that to some other things. Some people say it's an act, and he is a very articulate, normal guy when he's not in front of the cameras. Who knows? But I just think this is interesting. So I'm going to play for you just a very short part of this that caught my attention. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'll just play the clip. But I will say this for Trump. While I think what he says here in this clip is despicable, and I think when he repeated this sentiment in years far more recent, it was a despicable thing to say, I give him credit for being consistent. Apparently, he has always thought this, and here it is. You'll be able to pick it out right away.
The way Trump looks at it, he's at least better than everyone else in the race, beginning with John McCain.
I mean, he was captured.
And he flew combat missions with
Question,
distinction.
does being captured make you a hero? I don't know. I'm not sure.
George W. Bush.
So even back in 1999, Trump was saying that, saying, well, he's not a hero because he was captured, referring to John McCain. So that's all the time we're going to spend on that. I just thought that was like, I was like, wow. Okay, so, and by the way, the other thing about that interview, and it's up on Mediaite if you want to watch the whole thing. It's a 13-minute segment that he did with Dan Rather. Again, this was back in 99 leading up to the 2000 election. But it does seem like it kind of takes a little bit of the wind out of the sails of those who always say, well, Trump's a lifelong Democrat, and he only became a Republican when he saw an opportunity in 2011 to go after Obama with the birtherism and stuff. I don't think that's necessarily true, because here he was in 1999 talking about running for the Republican nomination. So I'm not so sure that he was really a lifelong Democrat. I mean, he was a big supporter of the Clintons, but I'm not sure that the narrative of him being a lifelong Democrat who just switched to being a Republican for the sake of capitalizing on what he saw as an opportunity. I'm not sure that's literally true. Some positive economic news. According to Reuters, U.S. job openings hover at record highs for the month of June. And I realize it's already August, but obviously when it comes to the economy, we don't know things in real time. We don't even know that we're in a recession until we've had 2 quarters of negative economic growth, and then we can look back and say, okay, so we have been in a recession. But we've got some numbers from June that indicate that U.S. job openings are at a record high. I can tell you, by the way, here in Manchester, New Hampshire, where there's record low unemployment, there are so many job openings. Now, they're not high-skilled jobs, right? They're not the kind of jobs that people with an education aspire to get, but I talked to somebody who works at the Burger King on South Willow Street here in Manchester, who actually told me that lately sometimes they actually have to close their drive-through. And I've never even heard of this happening. They have to close their drive-through because they don't have enough people to work to keep both the drive-through and the dining room open during the daytime, during regular hours. Thought that was stunning. But anyway, so this is broader. This is nationally. This is from Reuters. U.S. job openings held near record highs in June amid a modest decline in hiring, pointing to further tightening labor market conditions, which economists hope will spur faster wage growth. The monthly job opening and labor turnover survey, or JOLTS, released by the Labor Department on Tuesday, underscored labor market strength, which together with robust economic growth likely paves the way for the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates in September, which I think Trump has said he doesn't want them to do, but I mean, it's inevitable at some point. Chris Rupke, chief economist at MUFG in New York, said, quote, "The labor market continues to run hot, and this guarantees that more rate hikes are on the way. Fed officials are increasingly skeptical that this economy requires any monetary policy support whatsoever," unquote, hence the rate hike. The U.S. Central Bank increased borrowing costs in June for the second time this year. The Fed forecasts 2 more rate hikes by December. Job openings, a measure of labor demand, were unchanged at a seasonably adjusted 6.7 million in June. Vacancies hit an all-time high of 6.8 million in April. The job openings rate was unchanged at 4.3% in June. There were an additional 20,000 jobs in the education sector, rather, but vacancies declined by 84,000 jobs in the transportation, warehousing, and utilities industry. There have been reports of a widespread shortage of truck drivers. That's interesting to me, by the way, only because I wonder if people are getting scared off by getting into that industry or transportation in general, because driverless cars are eventually going to greatly reduce the need for truck drivers. You'll have driverless trucks. You'll have robots that can load and unload trucks. I mean, that's an industry that is eventually going to be depleted. And I don't know how soon, or if anyone has any projections on how soon, but I also didn't think that, we'd be talking about driverless cars in the year 2018. I thought that was like some futuristic thing that would be happening long after I'm gone, but it's here. The technology is here. It's actually happening. Let's see, it says here, there are concerns that the worker shortage will at some point hinder economic growth. The economy grew at a 4.1% annualized rate in the second quarter, the fastest in nearly 2 years, which actually has some economists worried that the economy is growing too fast because this may be a bubble that's been created by Trump's tariffs, and that I don't want to get sidelined with that, but we'll just stick with this. But there's a concern that number is not sustainable, and that we're going to that bubble's going to burst. But I guess that's always a concern when you have robust economic growth, right? So who really knows? In June, hiring slipped by 96,000 to 5.7 million. The hiring rate dipped to 3.8% from 3.9% in May. But hiring in the finance and insurance industry increased by 31,000 in June. Maybe all those prospective truck drivers are pursuing careers in finance and insurance instead. While the number of Americans voluntarily quitting their jobs fell by 78,000 to 3.4 million in June, the quits rate, which policymakers and economists view as a measure of job market confidence, held at 2.3% for a fourth straight month. That makes sense. I'd never thought about that. But yeah, if the rate, and apparently that it's called the quits rate. I wasn't aware of that phrase, but it does make sense, right? Because generally in an unsteady economy, you don't ever want to quit a job without having something else lined up, right? But if people are feeling confident that, I haven't personally done it, but I've known people who've done it who just say, I'm sick of this job, I'm quitting, without having something else lined up. But if it was at a point where the economy was strong enough and the job market was strong enough, they felt confident that they could do that and get away with it. And, they would have another job pretty quickly. I've actually known quite a few people who've done that. I myself never quite had the grapefruits, as Vince McMahon would say, to do that. Let's see. I've certainly been fired without having something else lined up right away. Let's see. Dante D'Antonio, an economist at Moody's Analytics in Westchester, Pennsylvania, said, quote, an elevated quit rate has important implications for income growth because workers typically secure new jobs paying about 5 to 10% more than their previous jobs, and employers will need to attract workers with better offers, unquote. Wage growth, as measured by average hourly earnings, has remained moderate, increasing 2.7% year to year in July. The JOLTS report also showed layoffs increasing to 1.7 million in June from 1.6 in May. That lifted the layoffs rate 0.1 of a percentage point to 1.2%. Daniel Silver, an economist at J.P. Morgan, said, quote, the June figure was on the high end of the range reported over the past 2 years, but still low by historic standards, unquote. So there you go. But if you are, I know in this area, New Hampshire is unique, though, in the sense that this state tends to have a pretty strong economy regardless of what else is going on in the country, whether it's things are booming or recessions. I've lived here all my life, and New Hampshire weathers recessions very well. I think better than most states. Now, I know, anecdotally, of course, there are people who will disagree and say, well, I went through a really hard time during that last recession, I lost my home. I got laid off, couldn't find another job, etc. You know, there are always individual stories and people I know personally who have not weathered recessions well, who have had a lot of strife and struggle. But I'm just saying, overall, in the macro, this state typically has one of the lowest, if not the lowest, unemployment rate in the entire country, both in good and bad times. I remember when I was a kid, you know, I had I'd be curious to know what Ben Dion thinks about this, because he teaches economics in high school. But when I was a kid, I remember an economics teacher saying that you know, New Hampshire is kind of an economic wonderland in that regard. But you know, but we're doing pretty well in a lot of places in the country. But they're also having some problems in places where these tariffs are really having a deleterious effect. And then the response is, well, if the tariffs are having a bad effect, we'll just do these giant bailouts. And it's like, well, why not just not do the tariffs? That's Trumponomics. We're doing okay with it for the moment, but we'll see what the future does bring. Let's see. We have some. This story I wanted to get to. This is about the ACLU. This is a quick thing, but Reason.com has a story up. The ACLU appears to endorse a ban on catcalling despite huge free speech concerns. What a deleted tweet says about the direction of a civil liberties organization. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, because I don't know if this term is used as much anymore, so any youngins listening who don't know what catcalling is when, you know, a woman is walking by whom maybe you think is attractive, and you yell something sexist at her. You know, I mean, you know, I think the stereotype is that this happens a lot at construction sites. It seems like that whenever I see catcalling on a television show or in the movies, it's always a woman is walking by a construction site, and you've got these guys who are yelling. Or when I used to watch The Sopranos, right? You know, they're on one of these jobs where, of course, they're not actually working; they're just collecting money, but they're catcalling women I mean, it's really sexual harassment is what it is, in my view. And I would just say, my personal feelings on it are that anyone who engages in catcalling, no offense to anyone listening who maybe at some point or another has done this, but if you do engage in catcalling and you don't feel the slightest bit of shame or embarrassment for doing that, you're a knuckle-dragging Neanderthal. I mean, you really have to be, you know, a troglodyte to catcall. It is a form of sexual harassment in my view. It's, you know, and I'm sure there are examples in the movies where someone catcalls and for whatever reason, you know, it works out and they end up on a date with the woman they were yelling at. But it's not okay in real life to do that. So I just, you know, I don't want anyone to be unclear on my personal position on catcalling. I think it's disgusting. I think it's gross. And if it's something that you engage in, you're just an idiot with a very tiny brain. Again, no offense intended to anyone who does engage in this process, but I just want you to know that I personally think you're an idiot. So here's what happened. So the ACLU, it says here, again, this is from Reason. On Friday, the American Civil Liberties Union seemingly called on America to follow France's lead and ban catcalling. The tweet was swiftly deleted, though the author of this article, Robbie Soav, did obtain a screenshot. And here's what the screenshot said. It simply says, "Your move, America." And there's a link to an NPR article explaining that catcalling is now a crime in France and is punishable by fines up to 750 euros, which is more than $870 American. Hello to Christian Cunard, who joins us in the Facebook live chat. A U.S. ban on catcalling, defined as street harassment of women, usually by men, often of a sexual nature, would likely violate the First Amendment unless the law was very narrowly tailored to prohibit only severe, pervasive, objectively offensive conduct or threatening behavior. Even then, the Supreme Court might strike it down. Think of Sidney versus Phelps. As obnoxious as catcalling is, the government can't prevent men from talking to women in public. This is something that many anti-catcalling groups understand explicitly, which is why they often oppose attempts to criminalize such behavior. Now, I want to stop there for a moment because, honestly, now, as much as I personally think it's disgusting, here's where I'm a little bit conflicted. Because on the one hand, obviously, you know, I mean, I'm someone who supports free speech, and I don't think that, you know, I think we go down a very dangerous road with things like, you know, political correctness and you know, threatening to criminalize people saying things that that the rest of us don't like or find abhorrent and whatnot. You know, I think we have to be very, very careful about that. And I think it's generally, as a general rule, better to err on the side of protecting the First Amendment, even with hate speech, which is disgusting. If you're not sure, if you're conflicted, you know, I mean, and I understand, again, with hate speech, well, if it's inciting violence, then, you know, maybe we do need to criminalize this and that. And, you know, we can get into all kinds of discussions about individual examples of that and debate that back and forth. I get conflicted on this stuff. You know, I mean, the First Amendment is to protect not popular speech, but unpopular speech, right? So to have the government come in and regulate that, I think takes us down a very dangerous road. So I tend to, as my position would tend to be, but I'll tell you where I'm conflicted in a moment. My position on this would tend to be that while I think you're a knuckle-dragging moron if you catcall, as gross as that is, and as embarrassed and ashamed as you should be, it's protected speech by the First Amendment. That would tend to be my position, but where I'm conflicted is, and I didn't mean to say it, like I wasn't consciously thinking this is what I'm going to say about this. It just came out a moment ago when I was describing catcalling, because again, young people might not have heard that phrase because I don't hear that term used that much anymore. When I was explaining what catcalling is, I described it as a form of sexual harassment. So that's where the conflict is. Again, on the one hand, I want to err on the side of the First Amendment, but on the other hand, it's like, well, wait a minute. Is it a form of sexual harassment? Do I need to rethink that? Was I too quick to say that? Maybe it's not. But if it is, then maybe it should be illegal. Maybe you should be fined for it. We don't tolerate sexual harassment in the workplace, or we're not supposed to, right? You're not supposed to be able to sexually harass people. So if catcalling is a form of sexual harassment, then maybe that should be addressed legally. Again, I want to err on the side of the First Amendment. But, yeah, I do think it's a form of sexual harassment. Unwanted comments toward a woman, you know, whether they're just walking by or whether, you know, you're in an employment situation with them, or, you know, in any circumstance, that's not okay. So there is a part of me that thinks, maybe we should do something. Again, the pro-First Amendment sort of quasi-libertarian in me says, no. But according to the ACLU's tweet, yes, we should do that. That was the position the ACLU was putting out there initially, but then they deleted the tweet. So the same sort of inner dialogue that I'm having about this, trying to figure out my position on this, may have also been happening in the offices of the ACLU, where it's like, okay, this is a little tricky. We're supposed to be advocating for the right. I mean, remember, the ACLU, at perhaps various points, or you know, or maybe it was only in one instance, really, but I believe it was in Skokie, Illinois. You know, the ACLU was defending the KKK and their right to march and to publicly demonstrate. And as disgusting, They talk about knuckle-dragging troglodytes, right? The Ku Klux Klan. As disgusting as those people are, the ACLU said, well, we have to defend, they have a First Amendment right. Now, again, the counter-argument would be, aside from the obvious one that these people are disgusting, there's also the argument, well, they are inciting violence. They are inciting civil unrest, and that creates danger. So that's the, because that's what everyone goes to, right? And that should be what everyone goes to. If you're going to make that argument, that's the best argument to make. The incitement of violence cannot be tolerated. So it gets complicated. It gets tricky. Okay, so getting back to this, a U.S. ban on catcalling defined as sexual harassment of women. Oh, I'm sorry, I already read that. Let's move down here. Even then, the Supreme Court might strike it down. Okay, we covered that. So it's pretty telling that the ACLU could forget, even for a moment, that banning catcalling would be a significant blow to civil liberties and would likely undermine other important goals, like criminal justice reform. In the U.S., at least, the government would disproportionately arrest poor people, immigrants, and people of color for catcalling. Yeah, so it's not just the construction worker, the guy in the hard hat who, sees a pretty lady and whistles and, it's, I mean, I guess, according to what this article is, it's mostly poor people, immigrants, and people of color. Is that true, though? I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen any statistics on this. Is that who catcalls? Let's see. Yes, I am aware that a single tweet does not indicate a broad structural shift in the ACLU's thinking. Most likely this was done by one social media editor. I am still astonished that such a person, someone who is deeply confused about what the ACLU ostensibly stands for, would find themselves in the position of running the ACLU's Twitter feed. Did free speech not come up during the job interview? I previously expressed concern that the ACLU was wavering on its ironclad commitment to free speech, given concerns raised by former ACLU board member Wendy Kaminer. Another trend of the organization, former President Nadine Strawson disputed this characterization. My fear, and it's a fear that the stray tweet would seem to confirm, is that free speech is becoming a secondary concern for the ACLU. Generic lefty social justice goals take precedence. And so the notion that the organization would stridently oppose catcalling legislation is no longer obvious to the people who work there. They think it's a progressive organization, not a civil liberties organization. Imagine if France had just banned burqas and the ACLU had retweeted a news story about it with the added caption, "Your move, America." This would be an outrageous betrayal of the organization's core mission, would it not? Okay, so I disagree a little bit with how Robbie Soav is assessing this. That's a false equivalence. Okay, if France said, we're banning burqas, and the ACLU said, your move, America, that's a completely different thing, because as I said, to me, the catcalling is more complicated. Yes, you want to defend free speech. No, you don't want to defend sexual harassment. It is more complicated, and I think that Mr. Soav is kind of, I think he's overreacting a bit. Oh, this shows a shift in thinking. The ACLU, they're not concerned about free speech. No, I'm pretty sure they are, and I'm pretty sure that's why the tweet got deleted. But it's not necessarily a bad thing in my view. If these conversations are going on in the offices of the ACLU and they're kind of evaluating this and, okay, well, is this something we should defend, or, what are the nuances in this issue? Because it's not a black and white world. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And if there's conflict over whether or not to defend certain speech and in certain instances and whatnot, I don't think that's a bad thing. Hello to Jennifer Gales Robert in the Facebook Live chat. Let's see here. Oh, Fred sent me some songs to play. Oh, wow. A lot of good stuff. Fred, thank you so much for this link. Oh, one of the things Fred Bonig, of course, from the dailyripple.org, one of the things he sent me is this great something that I've played on the show before, which perhaps I'll play again today. It's The Shady Bunch by Roy Zimmerman. It's a song parody of the Brady Bunch. I've actually played that a few times on the show, and it continues to be relevant. So perhaps I'll play that again today. Let's see. We are coming up on the top of the hour. Maybe we'll get one more story, and I am going to need to play something soon. I've been drinking this container of water, my friends. I had to refill it. I already drank. I bought this on the way here today to the studio. I already drank the whole thing. And I needed to refill it because I'm trying to remain hydrated because it is so hot. I don't know if it's quite as hot as yesterday. Yesterday it was 100 degrees. I think today it might only be 98 degrees. 98, remember 98 degrees? They're one of the boy bands from the late 90s, early 2000s. Never quite on the level of the Backstreet Boys or NSYNC, but they tried. Let's get one more thing in. There's so much to discuss. I want to save anything Manafort related. Here's something exciting. So my favorite website, and hopefully yours, rightwingwatch.org. Some of you will love this because, I personally don't like this idea, but I know some of my listeners will. According to prophetess, because she's a female. She can't just be a prophet. She's a prophetess, Kat Kerr, who is she's got a big internet presence online. And she says she can predict the future because she is a prophetess. She guarantees 24 years of God in the White House. And I am going to play the clip for you in a moment, but I have to tell you, personally, I'm a big separation of church and state guy. So, and I also would have some questions about the citizenship of God. I don't believe that God was actually born in the United States. So this might be tricky, and you can only serve 2 terms. According to the Constitution, should we make an exception for God? This might require a constitutional amendment if this is true. Now, granted, not everything that these prophets say turns out to be true. As some of you might recall, back in 2012, Chuck Norris, who I had never known to be a prophet, but he made a prediction. Chuck Norris said that if Barack Obama were elected to a second term, we would have 1,000 years of darkness on Earth. Barack Obama was elected to a second term, and so far so good. Seems like we have the same sort of day cycle. It's nighttime and then it's daylight and whatnot, and so I don't know what he was thinking when he said that. But nobody's perfect, right? People make mistakes. But Kat Kerr guarantees 24 years of God in the White House. Wow. Says here, last month, Florida-based prophetess Kat Kerr spoke at Elevation Rise Up, a conference in Tennessee, where she once again claimed that she had personally been assured by God that Republicans will retain control of the White House for the next 5 election cycles. Oh, I misunderstood. I thought that God himself or herself or whatever, I thought God was going to be president. No. God's going to make sure that we have Republican presidents for the next 5 cycles. God himself, of course, being a renowned political strategist. Here, I'm going to play the clip. This ought to be fun. Well, I just have to. Here we go. No. Here we go.
Vice President, 8 years, that's for free.
I'm going to start it over because I screwed it up, but I don't want to miss any of her wisdom.
Years, I'll vote in for free. Pence for 8 years, that's for free. And whoever Pence picks the Vice President, 8 years, that's for free. 24 years of God in the White House.
Wow.
The liberals need to be set free so they can have a life. step off my political platform. God put me on one. I knew he was going to win. I mean, I knew Trump was going to win because I'm a business person, and this country needed a business person to lead it. God actually said, I don't need a pastor in the White House. I need a businessman in the White House. And caught me up to heaven 4 times.
Wow.
It showed me everything that...
Wait. I just want to point something out here. Okay, this woman, this prophetess, Kat Kerr, she's something special. Not only does God talk to her, God actually called her up to heaven 4 times. Wow. You know you're in good with the big guy when he just brings you on up to heaven 4 times. Most of us haven't been to heaven even once. My goodness.
It would happen concerning Trump, and then showed me him sitting as president in the White House.
And then he showed me the PowerPoint presentation that he had been working on, which shows how the Republicans will be able to take and maintain control of the White House for the next 24 years. And he had flowcharts, and it was all very exciting. It was a bit overwhelming because, you know, the presentation was being given by God, and that's kind of a big deal. But, you know, but I really enjoyed it, and I did take copious notes.
There was nobody that couldn't convince me. He wasn't going to win. I don't care how many people running against him. We'll see. When God chooses you, and by the way, Trump said yes. Everybody say he said yes. He chose to be chosen. He couldn't.
What does that mean? Wait a minute. Is she implying that God even brought Donald John Trump to heaven to talk to him about this incredible opportunity? Maybe try to get him involved in some multi-level marketing while he's at it. I mean, my goodness, this is incredible.
Escape it. And no one's going to stop him. So give it up if you don't like him. God knew him before he was born.
Wow. Well, that is astonishing. And now I must tell you, my friends, I am a bit skeptical about this. Ooh, I hear sirens. There's an accident somewhere. I'm a bit skeptical about all this, but if she's right, my goodness, the next 24 years of Republican rule in the White House. God in the White House, as she said. It's all very, very exciting. Well, all right, let's take a break. I think I'm gonna play one of these songs that Fred sent. We'll take a break. Oh, here we go. A Pete Seeger song with, this might be appropriate. God's Counting on Me. Wait, I can't see the whole title. Long title. My goodness, Pete Seeger, he's awfully wordy, isn't he? God's Counting on Me, God's Counting on You. It's the Sloop mix featuring Laura Wyatt and friends. Well, you know what? Let's... I often hear this complaint that, oh, hello to Wolf in the Facebook live chat. I often hear a complaint that I don't play enough Pete Seeger on the show. So, no, I'm kidding. But in all honesty, I mean, he is a legend, Pete Seeger, and the song is 5 minutes long. I do need to leave the room for a moment, so it's going to play a long song. Like I said, I'm trying this Crystal Lake spring water. 1.5 liters, plus I've drank a second one of these about halfway, so I'm not good. I've had more than 2 liters of water, which really probably doesn't qualify as mass amounts. I may have exaggerated slightly, my friends, and I apologize. I mean not to lead you astray, although no matter how much I exaggerate, hey, at least I'm not claiming to have been to heaven 4 times. Wolf says, Anger Fist, Dead Face Dimension, you should listen to this. Well, I'll check it out, but that sounds like something called Anger Fist. Sounds like something I would need to listen to ahead of time before I play it on the show, just to make sure that it's all right for the kids. And by the kids, I really mean for the FCC. Okay, here's some Pete Seeger.
There'll be a human race here in a few hundred years if you and I work together in some way.
everybody. Welcome. It's hour number 2. Matt Connarton, Unleashed in the Afternoon. We are live on WMNH 95.3 FM, emanating from downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. 603-250-6007 is the number to call. 603-250-6007. Of course, you can also opine in the Facebook live chat if you're watching on the Matt Connarton Unleashed in the Afternoon Facebook page, or actually simply the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page. Wolf in the Facebook live chat says, he was recommending Anger Fist earlier. If you want something more normal, you could try Power Wolf, where the wild wolves had gone. It's sad music. Oh, my goodness. Well, I do appreciate these suggestions, Wolf. I wonder if this is someone I know, Wolf. It's kind of fun to say Wolf, isn't it? It kind of sounds like woof, which is the sound a dog makes, except a dog doesn't really sound like that, but it's not woof, it's wolf. I like it. Let's see. Well, we should address this. Speaking of, it's funny. I mentioned Corey Lewandowski earlier with his womp moment, and I said, making New Hampshire proud. Of course, I was being somewhat sarcastic. Wolf says absolutely. So here's another guy making New Hampshire proud. And again, I addressed this with great sarcasm. They were talking about it on the morning show, of course. It's the big story here in New Hampshire, in New Hampshire politics. And there's an update here from the Concord Monitor. Update: New Hampshire Dems elect new Senate Minority Leader as Woodburn vows to keep his seat. So for those of you who have not heard the story yet, this will, kind of get you caught up here. New Hampshire Senate Democrats elected Senator Donna Soucy as the minority leader Monday night, replacing Senator Jeff Woodburn after his arrest over a series of domestic abuse charges on Thursday. Wolf is saying, what time is it there? It is 5:14 p.m. in the Eastern time zone. So whoever this Wolf is, this mysterious Wolf, he's not from around here. In a Monday evening vote, 8 members of the Democratic caucus, that's a new word, caucus, chose Soucy hours. Wolf is in Romania. Oh, my goodness. Well, I do have a huge Romanian following. The Romanians love me. That's a fact. You can Google that. Sometimes I say things just to say things. But welcome, Wolf. Wolf the Romanian. Let's see. On a Monday evening, 8 members of the Democratic caucus chose Soucy hours after Woodburn announced he was stepping down from his leadership post in the face of the allegations. So just to be clear, Woodburn is not resigning. He's stepping down as minority leader, but he's not resigning his seat. Soucy, a third-term Manchester senator who had served below Woodburn as deputy Democratic leader, will fill the top post on an interim basis until the general election in November, at which point the party will hold a new vote, according to a party official. Absent from the vote, which was held by conference call, were Woodburn and Senator Lou D'Alessandro, Democrat of Manchester, who said he had a prior engagement, an official said. All others reportedly voted for Soucy unanimously. Well, the other day, Lou D'Alessandro, he wasn't calling for, unlike the other Democrats, he wasn't calling for Woodburn to resign. He said, leave it up to the voters. And that surprised me. It's pretty clear. If you're a longtime listener, you know how I feel about, any man who thinks it's okay to assault a woman, strike a woman, beat up a woman in any way is a POS and should be drummed out of polite society and should not hold office. And again, I know we have to, there is such a thing as due process and whatnot, but I don't think he's denying anything, right? He's stepping down from his post as minority leader. He should go ahead and go all the way with it and resign. That's my feeling. How that isn't clear to some people is beyond me, but there are some people to whom that is not clear, and they'll make excuses and so forth. And there is no excuse for this behavior. This guy needs to go away. This guy needs to, go find a deep hole to fall into. In a statement, Susie said she was, quote, honored to be selected Senate Democratic leader for the remainder of this session. I look forward to ensuring that we continue to focus on the issues, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I don't care about that. State Party Chairman Ray Buckley applauded the choice. Okay. The vote comes after a tumultuous few days for state Democratic leadership. Woodburn, age 53, was arrested Thursday in Concord and charged by the New Hampshire Attorney General's office with 9 misdemeanor counts related to domestic abuse, including 4 simple assault charges and 2 domestic violence charges. In a new release Thursday, Attorney General Gordon MacDonald said Woodburn displayed a pattern of abusive behavior toward his, quote, intimate partner. In a statement earlier Monday, Woodburn, the Senate Minority Leader since 2014, said he would be stepping aside to focus on defending himself in court and serving his constituents. See, if I were one of his constituents, I wouldn't want this guy serving me. I'd want him gone. I hope that's the sentiment among his constituents. He said, quote, I'm voluntarily stepping aside as minority leader to devote my full attention to clearing my name and representing my North Country constituents. As a father, my family comes first. Supporting them will be my priority during the difficult time ahead, unquote. Oh, that's so big of you. You're looking out for your family. Aren't you a good guy? Wow. The third-term senator, who represents 58 towns in the North Country, has faced a flood of calls from both Republicans and Democrats to resign from his seat. But a spokeswoman for Woodburn, Lisa Meyer, said he would be staying on in his position as the District 1 senator. Meyer declined to say whether Woodburn would resume campaigning for his re-election. Oh, jeez, can you imagine? Woodburn has previously said he will defend himself against the charges in court. He faces an arraignment August 20th at 10:30 a.m. in Lancaster First Circuit Court District Division Court. Reacting to the resignation, Senate President Chuck Morse, Republican of Salem, called Woodburn's abdication as minority leader a welcome development, but he urged Woodburn to go further and resign from the Senate altogether. I would agree. Morse said in a statement, quote, although we have not yet received formal notification, Senator Woodburn's decision to step down from his role as Senate Minority Leader is a prudent one at this time. It is clear that he is unable to uphold the duties and responsibilities of the Senate Minority Leader, but also as an elected official representing the communities of the 1st Senate District, unquote. Again, I would agree. The allegations continue against Woodburn, call for a more decisive response, Morse argued. He said, quote, I continue to believe that legislators should be held to a higher standard, and there is no excuse and absolutely no room for domestic abuse and violence in our society, unquote. Well, again, I would absolutely agree. Wolf in the Facebook live chat says, America and Russia would make a perfect team. That's a very interesting comment there, Wolf, if that is your real name. I think you keep making comments like that, I think a certain Mr. Mueller might be knocking at your door with a subpoena. What do you think of that? Yeah, that's what I think of that. Hello to John Chuck Gosson, who joins us in the Facebook live chat. Although I think he's, tell me if I'm correct about this. While you are John Chuck Gosson, I think you just go by Chuck, don't you? Because I believe, and the only reason I say that is because I believe that's how they refer to you on the morning show. They refer to you as Chuck Gosson, not John Chuck Gosson. I'm only including the John because it's in the it's how your name appears here. Wolf says or a pizza. Ah, now you're talking my language. Hey, I'll tell you what, if the Russians want to bring me a pizza, I will happily collude. I'm getting hungry. All this water I've been drinking is making me hungry. It washes all the whatever pizza I had been retaining in my stomach has been washed away. I think that's how it works. Is that how the digestive system works? I'm no expert in these matters. Me too, Wolf Wolf says. Well, we have something in common. Although I do not want to be called in front of a grand jury about anything regarding Russia. I will go on record as saying that. Well, speaking of all these Russia matters, I could try some cola for some energy. Well, you know, if you're going to... you could try some cola for some energy. Well, yes. You know what? I do have one of these caffeine shots here. I might just drink this straight. I've done it before. We have a call. Let's see who's on. I'm concerned. I'm worried that this is going to be Robert Mueller saying, "Who's this Wolf Wolf guy you're colluding with?" Hello, welcome. Who is this?
This is Jim O'Connell show.
The Jim O'Connell Show? No. No, it is not.
Nice to meet you, Jim O'Connell.
This is that Jim O'Connell fan that calls sometimes. It just doesn't make any sense. I cannot understand. I still think she sounds like the cat from Mr. Rogers, but I really don't know what's going on. Or perhaps Toonsis, the driving cat.
Jim O'Connell.
You're looking...
Put on Jim O'Connell.
I'm sorry, what?
Please put Jim O'Connell.
Oh, you want... Well, Jim O'Connell will be on Education Matters at 6 p.m. on Channel 23. Are you hissing? I think that was a hiss. You ever have a cat hiss at you? It's very scary. I love cats, but not when they hiss. Then I freak out and I go, ah! And then I run away in fear. So this is weird. According to Mediaite, the judge in the Manafort case says prosecutor was crying and demands, look at me when you're talking to me. This is weird, and I did not pre-read this, so I don't know what this is all about, but it says here, again, this is from Mediaite, things seem a little intense in the Paul Manafort case, because of course they are, but are they getting a bit out of hand? According to Bloomberg, U.S. District Judge T.S. Ellis III claimed that Mueller team prosecutor Greg Andres was frustrated and that there were tears in his eyes on Monday. Oh, my. The judge and the prosecutor exchanged words at the bench during the testimony of Rick Gates, who has admitted to stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from Manafort, who was his boss, no honor among thieves, while also helping Manafort conceal offshore accounts from the authorities to evade taxes and defraud the banks. Ellis failed to see how some of the finer details of Manafort's dealings in Ukraine relate to the case, and Mueller's team has reportedly butted heads with him over the relevance of this information. Here's how the exchange happened, according to the court transcript. The conversation was reportedly out of the jury's earshot. Ellis, so again, Ellis is the judge, or the magistrate, if you will, and Andres is the prosecutor. Okay. Ellis, look at me when you're talking to me. Andres, I'm sorry, Judge, I was. Ellis, no, you weren't. You were looking down. This sounds like a conversation I would have had in grade school with a teacher. Andres, because I don't want to get in trouble for some facial expression. I don't want to get yelled at again by the court for having some facial expression when I'm not doing anything wrong, but I'm trying the case. Ellis, to another prosecutor, you must be quiet. Andres, I'm sorry, Judge. Ellis, well, I understand how frustrated you are. In fact, there's tears in your eyes right now. Andres, there are not tears in my eyes, Judge. Ellis, well, they're watery. Look, I want you to focus sharply on what you need to prove the crime, and I don't understand what a lot of these questions have to do with it. Wow, what a bizarre... Now, if I could, I'd like to posit a theory. This Andres guy, this prosecutor, don't know anything about him. But is it possible that he suffers from allergies and his eyes were watering? And I bring this up because that happens to me all the time. All the time. Sometimes during the show, I'll be sitting here with someone like Jenny or John Hopwood or Glenn R.J. Willett, the People's Mayor, and my eyes will start watering. And someone will say to me with great concern, Matt, why are you weeping? And I'll say, I'm not weeping. My eyes are watering. And then they'll say, well, look at me when I'm talking to you. And I will say, but I am. I just don't want to get in trouble for some facial expression. And then they'll say, yes, you've committed microaggressions. And I'll say, I know, and I feel bad about it, but I'm not crying. My eyes are watering because I have allergies. And it just goes on, and it's a whole big scene, and it's just a giant misunderstanding. Is it possible that this prosecutor has watery eyes, which I believe is a song, right? Isn't that a song from the 80s, Eric Carmen? It's from the Dirty Dancing movie. I've got watery eyes. My allergies are acting up. That's, you know what? Of all my spontaneous song parodies, some of which, let's be honest, are brilliant, that one kind of missed the mark a little bit. I feel like I committed a faux pas, often known as shoehorning, in the industry, which is where you try to cram some lyrics into a space where they don't really fit, but you're trying to make it work. I'll tell you what. If I had a time machine, if I could go back, 2.5 minutes, and if I had it to do over again, I would rethink that. And let me also do this. I'd like to publicly apologize to Eric Carmen for attempting to do one of my, which are typically brilliant. You have to admit. Well, you don't have to admit it, but you should, and in your hearts, you know I'm right. I would have to apologize. I would like to apologize to Eric Carmen for publicly attempting one of my brilliant, spontaneous song parodies of his song Hungry Eyes, which I think is from the Dirty Dancing soundtrack. I would like to apologize for not doing it justice. And in fact, frankly, I've embarrassed myself. I've embarrassed, I assume, Eric Carmen. I've embarrassed the audience. I've probably embarrassed our new Romanian friend, Wolf. I've probably embarrassed Robert Mueller, and I've embarrassed the prosecutor in this case. But I'm sorry. And what I really want everyone to understand is I meant well. My intentions were good. I was trying to be funny. I was trying to bring a little levity to the situation. I'm actually very concerned about this prosecutor. He probably was crying. He probably was weeping. He's probably under a lot of stress. Although I don't know why. This is probably a slam dunk case, and Manafort's going to prison for the rest of his life, but whatever. But I'm just trying to help him out as someone who struggles mightily with seasonal allergies and with watering eyes. I mean, sometimes if I stand in one place for too long, though, there will be a puddle on the ground, and people go, Matt, what's with the puddle? Did you just wet yourself? And I have to explain to them, no, it's my watery eyes. And then it becomes this whole big thing again. It's very, very frustrating. So I'm trying to be empathetic to this prosecutor whose name I've already forgotten. Greg Andres, that's it. Let's see. Wolf says you should go in 1900 with an iPhone X and a Lamborghini. Everyone will think you're an alien. That, Wolf, I have to tell you, that sounds exciting, and it sounds like it would be quite the adventure, but I have an immediate concern. If I were perceived to be an alien, would not the local populace of wherever I ended up, would they not panic and try to kill me? That's what happens in the movies. My goodness. You see those old black and white movies, especially where there's some sort of alien invasion and people freak out and they want to kill the aliens. And look, I have to wonder. And this is not in any way a reflection on you being Romanian or anything like that. But you strike me as a fellow who might be a bit restless, and I almost wonder if you're trying to get me killed. I mean, I'm not saying it's a terrible idea. I'm just saying I have some reservations about it. But I don't know if I'll ever even have the opportunity. Who's to say I'll ever even own a time machine? I don't know. I've never even owned a new car. Who says I'm going to ever have a time machine? I mean, I'd like to have a time machine. I think it'd be fun. but dangerous. I would probably go into the future. See, if I went into the future, well, that could be dangerous too. What if I went into the future and people are much smarter in the future and people thought I was some kind of idiot? They might lock me away or euthanize me or something. I'm rethinking this whole time travel thing. I don't even want to time travel anymore. I'm going to leave that to, whoever out there time travels. I don't know if we have any time travelers in the audience, but if you're a time traveler yourself, I'm going to leave that to you. You ever see any of those old photos, though, where these old black and white photos where it looks like someone's holding a cell phone, and it's an optical illusion, but or someone looks like they might be dressed a little out of character for how people dressed in that time, and then people go, oh, see, that's a time traveler. But it's not really a time traveler. It's just fun. It's fun stuff. It's fun to look at pictures like that and speculate and wonder. So, I'm very angry about civil asset forfeiture. If you're a regular listener of the show, and it seems like it's getting to a point now where every day there's a new story about civil asset forfeiture on Reason.com. Civil asset forfeiture, of course, where the government is allowed to steal your property, your assets, your bank accounts, your vehicles from you, and they get to just do so without due process on the suspicion that you might have done something. Wolf says they will ask you how was in 2018. Well, presumably in the future they'll have history books and the internet. They'll know how it was in 2018. Well, it depends on how far into the future I go, I guess. What if there is no future? What if I were to time travel into the future and it turns out that we do have Armageddon sometime in the future and I end up, in a place where there's nobody else and then I can't get back and then I'm screwed? And there a Twilight Zone episode like that? So it says here, this is from Reason.com. This is the latest civil asset forfeiture article that has me infuriated. The Justice Department didn't charge him with a crime. It's going to take $39,000 from him anyway. It's not a crime to travel with lots of cash, but you still might get treated like a criminal. So this is a new story, but if this story sounds familiar to you at all, it's because these stories are not unusual. This kind of thing goes on all the time, and I continue to be baffled as to why we as Americans tolerate this nonsense, this abuse by the government. And guess what? Ha ha ha. This happened in New Hampshire. All right, so Scott Shackford writes this for Reason.com. In order to get back any money that the New Hampshire State Police took from him, Edward Phillips has agreed to let federal prosecutors keep most of it, even though he has not been charged with any crimes. Just want to take a moment to remind everybody, of course, this is the live free or die state. The cops took the cash during a traffic stop in 2016. Phillips wasn't even in the car at the time. The police pulled the driver over for tailgating and going 1 whole mile per hour over the speed limit. That's really unusual. Usually in New Hampshire, you can go up to 10 miles over and no one will even, think about pulling you over. That's really strange. A search turned up a full bag of $46,000 cash in the trunk. Police then brought in a drug-sniffing dog, which came up empty. So they see all this cash. They assume he's a drug dealer. Though they have presented no evidence of any criminal act, police took the money, and federal prosecutors declared their intent to force the forfeiture of the funds so they could keep it. Phipps came forward in July. I think I said his name wrong earlier. I said Phillips. It's Phipps. Phipps. Came forward in July 2017 to indicate that the cash was his, and he said it was obtained legally. We took note of this case back in March, and it looks like the Justice Department succeeded in getting its way. As part of a settlement, Phipps has agreed to give the Department of Justice $39,000 of the $46,000 seized as part of a settlement. This guy didn't do anything wrong, wasn't charged with anything, and has to do a settlement with the government to get a fraction of his money back? Why do we as Americans tolerate this? I know, I say it all the time. I get it. Civil asset forfeiture. It's not on anyone's top 5 list of issues they're concerned about. It's not probably even on anyone's, well, it is on some people's list of top 10 issues that they're concerned about. But it's the government's war against the people. And we shouldn't put up with it. And the good news is, in individual states, there have been some inroads into stopping this practice. But right here in New Hampshire, in the live free or die state, the state police steal this man's money. There's no other way of putting it. They stole his money. And he's now reached a settlement to get a tiny fraction of it back. There's no justification for this at all. Says here, this was a case of civil asset forfeiture, where law enforcement officials take and keep people's assets that they suspect are connected to criminal activity. Often, they can do this without convicting or even charging any person. Yep, no due process for this. With a crime. Instead, the property itself is accused of being linked to misconduct. The defendant in this settlement is the cash itself. The Department of Justice is suing a sack of money. The absurdity of it. This weird quirk matters because the burdens of proof in civil courts are often lower than the, quote, beyond a reasonable doubt required to convict a person. So it's easier for prosecutors to win, and it flips presumption of innocence on its head. Phipps has to hire a lawyer and prove his money isn't connected to a criminal activity. And by the way, and there's more to this story, but by the way, that's part of the scam. That's part of the government's war on the people. They take your money, you have to hire a lawyer to sue the government to get it back. Oh, how do you do that when they took your money? How are you supposed to hire a lawyer when they've already seized all your assets and you don't have anything? You got to find a lawyer who's willing to work pro bono to help you get your stuff back. And there are lawyers out there who are so angry at the government over this continued practice and its abuse of the American people that they will take these cases pro bono to help people. But it's going on so much, and that's part of the scam. They take your stuff, they take your money, and then say, oh, you got to sue us to get it back, even though you've never been convicted of anything, even though you've never been charged. You haven't even been charged of anything. No due process whatsoever. We just took your stuff. Sue us to get it back. Go ahead and try. It's maddening. So it says here, as part of the settlement, Phipps not only agrees to give up everything but $7,000, which will probably have to go to his legal fees, he agrees never to request that the money be returned, and he furthermore agrees never to attempt to assert any claim that the government did not have probable cause to make him forfeit the money. I'm highlighting that part of the story to show how much lower the legal threshold is to take somebody's stuff and keep it. Probable cause is the amount of evidence police need for a search warrant, not nearly enough to convict somebody of a crime. A note here, both a Justice Department official and a reader contacted me to point out that the legal threshold for federal civil forfeiture is a preponderance of the evidence, a more restrictive requirement than probable cause. This is true, but the settlement uses the term probable cause to describe the justification for the seizure and forfeiture, not the stricter legal requirement. This wasn't supposed to happen. New Hampshire reformed its civil asset forfeiture laws in 2016 to require a criminal conviction before police or prosecutors could force people to forfeit money or property. Unfortunately, the state's reform did not close a loophole that lets police partner with the feds in a program called equitable sharing. In this system, local police use the federal asset forfeiture program instead of their own, and then the Justice Department distributes most of the forfeited money back to local law enforcement. Let's be clear about what this is. This is your state government and your federal government conspiring against us all. A little bit more to this. It says, that's why the Department of Justice is involved here. The state police can't seize Phipps's money on their own, so they went to the feds to arrange the forfeiture. And then the equitable sharing program lets the Justice Department funnel the funds right back to local law enforcement. It's not money laundering when it's the government. It's a criminal conspiracy against us, against you and me, by the government. And, it's moments like this. Look, I'm kind of a limited government guy, but I'm far, and I try to be at least somewhat of a quasi-libertarian, but I recognize the need for government. I see government as a necessary evil, and I do use the term evil deliberately, but I do see government as a necessary evil. I do think we need government, unfortunately. But it's stuff like this that go, geez, maybe the anarchists are right. Because as much good as government may do, they do some really evil stuff as well. And this is absolute evil. This is an example. The New Hampshire State Police and the Justice Department engaging in a criminal conspiracy against a New Hampshire resident. That's exactly what this is. And everybody involved in this, protect and serve my ass. These people are all engaging in a criminal conspiracy, and they should all have to resign. They are not servants of the people. They are not protecting and serving. They are involved in a criminal conspiracy against the people, and it's disgusting. And I would call on any honorable members of law enforcement to publicly call on these people to all resign. And again, I know it's not at the top of anyone's list of important issues. And I understand that. But because, statistically, I assume statistically, we're all likely, all of us as individuals who are listening to the show right now, we'll take us, right? Statistically, you're probably more likely to be struck by lightning than you are to have the government seize all your stuff, right? I get that. The odds of this happening to me or happening to you are pretty unlikely, especially since, I don't have a large amount of cash to be driving around with, okay? I get that. Because that's what I always hear from people. Oh, Matt, why do you get so upset about this? What are the odds of this actually happening to you or anyone you know? Pretty slim. I get that. But there is a larger point here. We need to stop tolerating the government making war against its own people. And by the way, there's a connection here. There's a through line. What was the excuse for why they seized his money? Oh, look, he's got a lot of money. He's got all this money in cash. He must be a drug dealer. So it all relates to the war on drugs. And the war on drugs is the government's war against the American people. And civil asset forfeiture really is just a part of that. So let me rephrase actually what I said earlier. Civil asset forfeiture is not the government's war against its own people. The war on drugs is the government's war against its own people. And civil asset forfeiture is merely a very large weapon used against the people of this country by the government to fight that war. But make no mistake, that's exactly what the war on drugs is. It is a war against the American citizenry. And we're making progress, by the way, little by little. It is in inches. It is incremental. But we are making progress. Eventually, cannabis is going to be legal, and that in and of itself is progress. President Trump, who I have a lot of criticism of, but credit where it's due, President Trump has said that he is open to the possibility of federally decriminalizing cannabis. Progress is being made. More and more states are legalizing or decriminalizing. Progress is being made against the war on drugs. But we've got to keep going. We've got to keep pushing. Not only to make cannabis legal, but I say do what Portugal did. I'm not, well, or close to it. Maybe you don't legalize hard drugs. Maybe you only decriminalize hard drugs. But does what we're doing now look like it's working? What we're doing now is used as an excuse to grab money from people like this guy who just happened to have a lot of money on him. No presumption of innocence, no due process. Oh, and then they so generously give him a tiny fraction of his money back. Wolf in the Facebook live chat says, in the country where you live, it's more better than here. Well, what's it like in Romania? I don't know that much about Romania. I know that I remember a George Carlin bit where he said that George Carlin, God rest his soul, he did this bit where he would talk about sports and, you know, how some sports aren't really sports, like like golf, for example. Hitting a ball with a crooked stick and then walking after it and then hitting it again. That's clearly not a sport. And when he got to gymnastics, because he goes through this whole list, and then when he gets to gymnastics, he said, gymnastics isn't a sport because Romanians are good at it. And just it's funnier when he said it. My delivery of the joke isn't that great, I will admit. Let's see, we got about 10 minutes left. I'd like to find something fun because I got so worked up. I get very worked up and angry about civil asset forfeiture. Wolf says the government is extremely corrupted. Well, I mean, the libertarians, the anarchists, they would argue that's the very nature of government itself, that it's impossible to have government that's not corrupt, which I think is basically true. I mean, obviously people have power in government, and, the phrase of absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I'm not surprised. Let's see. I want to actually, this is kind of a complicated issue, and we don't have a lot of time left, but let's do this. Actually, I'm going to save the other thing for tomorrow. Let's do this, though, because we were talking about cannabis and the war on drugs. This is kind of an interesting story, and this is also from Reason.com, by the way. Facebook blocks searches for pages that reference marijuana, even those of government agencies. The platform is struggling to handle contradictory laws about legal and illegal use of cannabis. Wolf says, here it's a possibility to start a revolution in 1 week. Oh, my. So, I was just talking about some of the progress that we're making against the war on drugs, but apparently Facebook doesn't want you discussing cannabis online. It says here, if you type in the word marijuana in a search bar at Facebook today, you might be surprised at what comes up. Rather, you might be surprised at how little comes up. Here's what you get when you look for pages with marijuana in the name. We couldn't find anything for marijuana. There are, in fact, many pages on Facebook that have used the word marijuana in the name. Some of them are activist organizations, media outlets, and even government agencies. But last night, Marijuana Moment writer Chris Roberts noticed that these pages are not showing up when you search on Facebook. The pages still exist, and if you have the URL for them, you can still visit them. But if you don't know where they are, Facebook is not going to tell you. This is what's called shadow banning. Rather than deleting or censoring pages, Facebook is making them hard or impossible to find. Marijuana Moment is itself affected by the shadow ban. Here's their Facebook page, but if you type Marijuana Moment into Facebook's search engine, it was not coming up. No groups, posts, or events with marijuana in the name come up on searches. News stories about marijuana do, but only video stories. Roberts notes that social media sites have been struggling to figure out how to deal with marijuana content as the plant itself becomes increasingly legal. And Roberts wrote this: advertisements for marijuana businesses or advocating cannabis use are regularly blocked on Facebook and other social media websites, including Instagram, which is also a Facebook property, for violating community standards which ban the sale of quote-unquote illegal drugs. Algorithms often block promotions for news articles or other non-commercial posts that merely mention marijuana or cannabis, a situation that often requires lengthy appeals processes to clear automatically flagged content that doesn't actually violate terms of service. All right, so then getting back to Reason, it says the shadow ban went so far as to block searches for the California Bureau of oversees the regulation of the legal recreational marijuana industry in the state. Roberts notes that their Facebook page is a clearinghouse of information on upcoming meetings and regulatory decisions. A spokesman told they have not gotten an explanation from Facebook as yet as to why this was happening to them. But yeah, I had no idea that Facebook had been shadow banning all these pages. And we are joined by John Hopwood. Are you here to plug your show?
Hey, what's going on? I'm told that the First Lady's calling for me down here at the studio. I come down, and everybody's having a laugh because a certain ex-so-and-so, Grand Poobah of the municipality, is up there waiting to go on to do his 3 minutes for, executive council speech. What are you guys up to? Having fun with poor old Hop?
I would never.
I'm supposed to come down here and see Melania or get on the phone with her, and guess who I get to see? Old Cuddles himself. Except Jim O'Connell in the studio. So
oh my!
We don't want anybody going to police on dear old Hop.
Right.
Well, the new chief has handled me before in such situations.
It's generally better to not have the police called on you, in my experience. I think that's kind of a life lesson that at some point we all need to learn.
Not be on. Connie Van Houten will be, and Heidi Hamer will be co-hosting as part of Ward 13 presents the West Side candidates. Now, Garth Corvo, who might be facing off against old Cuddles for executive council, is going to be their guest tonight. And yes, he is from Ward 13, if you will, the West Side, the Amaskeg, He does live in Ward 12 now. Although Connie is facing off, she's in the Flotarial, which is 10, 11, 12, against a candidate, Free Stater, by the way, who does claim that the part of the Flotarial district is Ward 13. Isn't that exciting?
That is exciting.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
of course, Ward 13
is that
on...
Cuddles going by?
It's on, I don't know, I didn't see. That's on Channel 23.
He is cuddly.
And people can watch it online, too, at manchestertv.org. And you select Channel 23 on the website.
When I see the flower pot maven, the ex-flower pot maven, I just say, hi, Rich. We don't even, it doesn't, hi. Well, I don't think he ever says hi to me, but he might grunt or look at me askance, which I think is a greeting. So what's been happening today? Is Donald Trump still our favorite president?
He is still the president. The Donald John Trump, absolutely, the 45th and final or favorite president of these United States. It's very exciting.
Did you get the video about the Creationist Museum?
No, I've talked about that in the past.
About it,
though. Oh, the Creationist Museum. Yeah, where is it? In Kentucky, I think.
But people check out Matt Connarton, hypnotherapist, because I would blush to put it on anything associated with WMNH. What happened at the Creationist Museum?
Why? What happened?
Well, things happen. Mickey Rooney's gone, but his spirit is still around. Doesn't he haunt museums?
I think
along with Amy Adams.
The problem, of course, with Creationist Museum, it's a bit of an oxymoron.
Why?
You can't have a Creationist museum.
Why?
Because a museum is supposed to be for historical artifacts.
You know what? I'm so tired of people, you naysayers, when I was at Oxford University Press, which does, sponsor Jeopardy, which means that Ward 13, which is on at 7 o'clock, never gets any viewers except my faithful 13. And I once edited, a pictorial history of historical pictorians. And people like you said, oh, that's a bunch of bull, expletive deleted. And, do I have to take you? Because I lost my books, granted, in that flood last week. Down to New York.
Deluge of water?
Down to Madison Ave and show you that that's a real book. Oh, you naysayers. Your negativity. Oh.
I don't mean to be,
Where is she?
Where's who?
You can't say that Cuddles was why I was brought down here.
Melania? Where's Melania?
Oh, yeah.
Where in the world is Melania Trump?
I love her. I'm going to make a bold declaration of my love and feel to.
More so than Hillary? Your love of Hillary or Debbie Wasserman Schultz?
Those were just trifling things. Trifling. I never saw them in a stainless steel fur-lined bra.
No, me neither. To be quite honest.
Matching panties.
Wow. All right. Well, be sure
to modeling them.
Be sure to check out John's show, complete with guest hosts, tonight at 7 p.m. on TV 23, and then we'll have it up later in the week on the IPM Nation YouTube channel.
Ghost hosts.
Ghost hosts. Oh, okay. All right, and that's it for now. If you missed any part of today's show, it'll be up in just a little bit at WMNHradio.org, and I'll be back tomorrow. Matt Connarton, Unleashed in the afternoon, weekdays, 4 to 6 p.m., right here on WMNH 95.3 FM. And that's it for now. I'll talk to you all a little bit later. Bye, everybody.